Have you ever felt like you're not a good enough candidate for a job? Like you don't deserve that promotion at work, you're afraid of starting the blog or to lead a team? Well, you might be experiencing what experts call imposter syndrome. Now, that virus held me back in my career until I changed my perspective, flipped the switch, and learned 4 life-changing habits from it. In this video, I'm going to share those 4 life-changing habits with you and show you how you can use them to overcome imposter syndrome in 2024. Hi, welcome back. I'm Ayomi everybody. I'm a tech professional with almost 10 years experience, and I help tech professionals build vibrant careers. Many people are accustomed with different expressions of imposter syndrome, and it usually shows itself when we're about to take the next step in our career, when we're about to make the next ambitious move. Earlier in my career as a self-taught developer, I had a very strong feeling of imposter syndrome because I was working with very experienced engineers who had strong computer science backgrounds from reputable universities across the world. And I always felt like a fraudster. I always felt like a fraud in the room. I always felt like I was going to get found out. And because of that, I spent a lot of time reading, I spent a lot of time researching, and I just developed a habit of reading engineering blogs by some of the best engineering teams in the world, from Netflix, from Uber, from Instagram. And sadly, they actually made me feel worse, right? Because they made me more aware of the gap in my knowledge. I was more aware of how much I needed to learn, and I just felt worse. Well, thankfully right now I have over 7 years experience building software systems. I've worked with more experienced engineers, and I've been able to harness imposter syndrome and do great work regardless. So first, get comfortable with ignorance. Our biggest hindrance is that we are often afraid of being found out as ignorant. We are afraid that it might affect people's perception of us or even our perception of ourselves. And usually this leads to the fear of failure or the fear of success. So you're afraid of succeeding because it might lead to more responsibilities at work, and you might not be able to deliver on those responsibilities, and people will realize that you're not as good as they think you are. Alternatively, it could be the fear of failure. So you're afraid of failing because when you fail, it shows people that you're not as experienced as they assumed that you were. However, internalizing and accepting that only God is all-knowing and that no man is an island of all knowledge is relieving, because it places us in a state where we are humble. We have internalized ignorance, and we have transformed ignorance as a fuel to learn more, as a fuel to do more, as a fuel to actually research more, right? And the thing is, interestingly, that generally we are very empathetic to people who are ignorant. We are actually very empathetic to inquisitive or curiously ignorant people, right? Like at our jobs, we are empathetic to lead engineers who actually have forgotten something. Leader engineers are very empathetic to junior talents because they understand that they're just starting their career. So across the corporate ladder, someone who is more experienced is more empathetic to somebody who is less experienced because they understand that that person doesn't know everything, and that's why they're there to mentor, that's why they're there to provide support. And the person who is less experienced is empathetic to a senior because they expect that, hey, you're a senior, you probably have forgotten, you probably have not just delved into every area. And that's why we also have like the idea of specialization, and we have the idea of ranking and rating within the corporate ladder. And so it feels very weird, and it's a weird thing because rather than see ignorance and leverage ignorance and accept humility in our lives and become curious and inquisitive and ask questions, ignorance tends to make us afraid. So we don't know stuff, and so we're afraid. We don't know stuff, we're afraid of trying. We don't know stuff, we're afraid of giving it our best. And that's one of the biggest problems people have with ignorance. And so one of the things I learned was to internalize and accept my ignorance. I see ignorance as an opportunity to learn something. I see ignorance as an opportunity to know more, right? I'm kind of like an explorer. I'm exploring in my work, I'm exploring in software engineering, I'm exploring in marriage, I'm exploring in fatherhood. And so whenever I see an opportunity where I don't know stuff, whenever I notice that I don't know stuff, I see that as an opportunity to learn something new. I see that as an opportunity to add a book into my library of knowledge, my library of experiences. So the first thing I would say is get very comfortable with ignorance, embrace it, remove the shame in being ignorant. And the easiest way to do that is to be humble, is to be hungry, right? Don't portray yourself bigger than who you are, better than what you are, right? Portray yourself exactly how you are. If you know 10 things out of 11 things that are required, say you know the 10 things, emphasize that you know the 10 things, and be willing to learn the 11 stuff. Which leads to my next point, which is asking for help. I remember when I first had the opportunity to lead a project that had significant revenue impact and a tight deadline, and I was really in my feelings at the time. I was conscious of all the various ways that I could fail, and all the various ways that I could miss the deadline, miss my communication with PMs, and just do badly. And so to fix that, I reached out to an engineering mentor to provide support and coaching throughout that process, and it really helped because it gave me the freedom to explore. I could piggyback on their feedback whenever I was communicating with PMs, when I was working on my rollout plans. I could reach out to them first before reaching out to the wider audience, and so it really helped me manage my fear of failure, because now I was interacting with just one person rather than being overwhelmed with reacting or interacting with the rest of the engineering organization. And so I really recommend that if you're in a situation where you have something massive to do and you're feeling imposter syndrome and you're feeling the fear of failure, that you should reach out to someone who has way more experience within your organization or outside the organization based on the case, and ask them for help, ask them for mentorship, ask them for coaching, and leverage their insights, leverage their experience, because it's going to help you to get the higher standard and deliver your best work. Yeah, so now the third thing is set realistic expectations of yourself, to yourself, and to stakeholders. A standard motto we have within the professional space is that we under-promise and over-deliver. So the idea is that you don't make promises that you don't keep, you make realistic promises, and then you try your best to exceed them. In some way, you make less than realistic promises, and you try your best to exceed them. So that's how you set yourself up for success. Now, I said two things. Ensure that you set realistic expectations of yourself, to yourself, and to stakeholders. So on setting realistic expectations to yourself, for instance, say you're starting a YouTube channel and you do research and you figure out that YouTubers post videos twice every week, 3 times every week, but you have a full-time job, you have a kid, you have a family, you have religious responsibilities, or you have responsibilities to an NGO, responsibilities to a club, you have a hobby and stuff. So you have your life set and you're about to add like this extra stuff to your life, which is creating YouTube videos, but you can't do 2 videos per week. You can't do 3 videos per week. If you're going to do that, it's going to require like massive discipline from yourself, right? And so the best thing would be to set a cadence that you can work with. If it's 1 video per week, if it's 2 videos per month, set a cadence that you can work with to ensure that you are successful, to ensure that you don't give yourself some form of negative feedback where you end up feeling that you don't deserve what you're doing, you end up feeling that you're not great, you end up feeling that you're terrible, you end up feeling like you're the worst YouTuber out there in the world because you set a cadence for yourself that you can't match up with, a cadence for yourself that is really unrealistic. Now, about setting realistic expectations of yourself with stakeholders, an example is you get a new project that you're supposed to lead. It's a very important project, it's very critical, but you're in a state right at that moment where you know that you don't have enough expertise for you to be able to lead that project, but you might be a great co-lead of the project. So ideally, I would recommend that whenever you're given responsibilities at work, you look at the responsibilities, you introspect, you analyze it, you ask your manager or your supervisor for their expectations of that project, right? Oftentimes, it's not just delivering the project. So for instance, if you're working on a library or if you're working on a design, that's just an experiment. The expectations of that design would completely be different on if you're working on a design that's going to affect like 30% or 40% of the revenue of the business. It's not just delivering another project, it's delivering another project impeccably. Communication has to be impeccable, a lot of things has to be done properly, and that's a good opportunity. That's like an ambitious opportunity that you need. That's an opportunity that sets you up for the next stage of your career, but you might not be ready for it, right? It's almost better not to get exposed than to be exposed to the limelight when you're not ready. And so the best thing you can do there is to have a real heart-to-heart conversation with your manager and say, hey, I know you're trying to set me up for success, I know you're doing this for my benefits, I know that this would take my career to the next level, it would give me the kind of trust, the kind of respect within this organization. but I don't think I'm ready for it, right? We're still working on stuff. I'm still working on this with my mentor. I'm not yet very good at communicating. I'm still very fidgety at calls and stuff. So I would rather XYZ be the lead of this while I co-lead, right? I'm very good at this, so I'm going to handle all of this stuff while XYZ handles leading and stuff. And you excel with it, you do it perfectly well. One of the good things is that you've shown your manager that they can trust you. You've shown the rest of your organization that you prioritize the success of the business over your pride. And if you deliver very well as the co-lead, you've positioned yourself in a place where you can learn from the person who is leading. You can see what you're doing. You're still at the front line without being the person taking the responsibility for the project, and you get to share in the reward of succeeding on that project. So set realistic expectations of yourself, to yourself, for things that are just about you, and also to your stakeholders. All right, so the fourth thing is document your wins. Now, as human beings, we tend to forget our victories. We tend to easily remember our failures, right? That's the reason why when it comes to even news, media and stuff, we find out that bad news sells faster. Good news doesn't sell as much. If you find a public figure do something good, do something great, something charitable, we tend to forget easily. However, if the same public figure does something bad, does something not so ideal for a public figure, we tend to remember it, we tend to escalate it, we tend to reminisce and ponder on it more. So it's very important that we document our wins. There are outstanding benefits to documenting wins. I'm going to do an extensive video on why people should document their wins, how people should document their wins, and how it impacts our performance review. But for today, just take it from me. It's important that you write your wins. Now, my definition of a win is any positive impact you had within your organization, and that's for fixing imposter syndrome within your organization. But there's also imposter syndrome personally. So whatever aspect of your life, it's important that you spend time, maybe even weekly, maybe monthly, to sit down. People advise that we journal every day. So if you're the kind of person who journals every day, make a conscious effort of writing the good things you did that day, right? The impacts you made at work, the impacts you made in someone's life, the contributions you made to a project, the contributions you made if you paired with someone and you received the kudos for it, if you shipped the projects at time, if you've even improved in communication, if you got a good feedback from your manager, write it, document your wins, and occasionally take time to read, to look at your wins, to reflect, to meditate on your wins. Because most times, one of the strongest points imposter syndrome has and how it locks us is that it makes us forget our growth. It makes us lose our growth mindset and our growth consciousness. So because you're looking at a challenge, you're looking at the next level in your career, and you're afraid of doing it because you're forgetting that you've been in this position before. Not the same problem, not the same kind of problem, but you've faced things previously in your life that were a bit outside your comfort zone, and you overcame them. And that's a win. Now, when you're facing such situation, it's important for you to go back and reminisce. It's important for you to just go back and just ponder on it and just tell yourself, I've been here before. I've done stuff like this before. I've done stuff outside my comfort zone. I've done stuff a little bit beyond my current knowledge and stuff, and I succeeded. So I can definitely succeed here. So please document your wins. It's very important. Finally, right, we talk about imposter syndrome a lot. We talk about how we feel like we're an imposter, how we feel like we're a fraudster, and ideally across the board, whenever people feel like that, we tend to accept that it's imposter syndrome, and we tend to motivate them, and tend to tell them to just persevere and to ignore the feeling and go ahead. However, certain times it is actually that we're not competent enough for the next challenge. It's actually that we need to take a step back, research, build knowledge, build confidence, grow before we take the next challenge. Now, it's very important to distinguish between a real lack of experience or competence or a need to gain more knowledge and expertise versus imposter syndrome. It's important to know when it's just your feelings that is making you feel like a fraudster versus when you actually need to know, or when you actually need to build your competence, it's very important to differentiate this, because if it's the later case where you need to build your experience and you feel it's imposter syndrome and you go ahead despite the reality that you need to build experience, you end up failing, and then you end up providing bullets for imposter syndrome in cases where it is actually imposter syndrome. So my recommendation is to spend time and to differentiate it. There's certain times where you're not just experienced enough. There's certain times where you just actually need to sit down and gain knowledge and do more research, and after you've gained more knowledge and done more research, now face the challenge. And there's certain times when it's like, hey, this is beyond me, I'm sorry, this is beyond me, I can't do this right now, I'll look into it in the next 2 years, in the next 3 years. And there's certain times where it makes sense to just drop expectations, drop requirements, take it down and do what you can do. I hope this has been helpful for you. See you guys next time.